We're gonna go ahead and get started. We do have a quorum. Welcome, Veronica, to your first committee meeting of Government Operations. Veronica does have to leave a little after 1, so hopefully we can get through most of this by then. If not, that's quite all right that you need to leave. Okay, so I call this Government Operations Committee meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Anyone knows about? No. Okay, no changes to the agenda. Do we have any comments from the public?
We do not.
We do not. All right. Let's take the minutes of December 2nd, 2021. Can somebody move those? Dan moves, seconded by Mike seconds. Any questions or comments or edits on the minutes? All right, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote. Dan?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, we have a couple of advisory, advisory board appointments. They are at the back of your packet. They are for 3 members of the Tompkins County Public Library Board of Trustees, and all 3 of them are currently serving, and this is a renewal of their appointment. So any questions or comments about those appointments? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Dan?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Oh, and I'm a yes. I forgot to vote last time.
We can get a mover and seconder.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, we need somebody to move the appointments.
I'll move it if you want.
Okay, Mike moves, Veronica seconds, and I think everyone's vote probably remains the same.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay, moving on, we have a resolution from the Department of Assessment. Find that. And Jay Franklin is here. This is the appointment of temporary Board of Assessment review members to serve on administrative review panels. All right, excuse me. Can I have somebody move that, please? Dan moves, Rich seconds. Welcome, Rich. Jay, do you want to say anything about this to us?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'll just touch briefly because I see a lot of the new faces here. So each year during the month of May, we have a full Board of Assessment review of 3 members who would typically hear grievances against my office when a property owner disagrees with the assessment and we think that assessment is correct. The law allows us to appoint up to 2 times our full bar members, so we can appoint 6. This way we can take our 1 Board of Assessment review, move it into 3 hearing panels, and be able to have a little more expertise on these hearing panels so that a commercial property owner can go to someone who's more well-versed in commercial appraisal, the more urban market, and then kind of the farm rural market as well. So this allows us to have more specialized board. It's something we have to do each year because their appointment only lasts for 1 year. The full Board of Assessment review, the appointment lasts for 5. So these 6 individuals all served last year. With the amount of changes and the value amount of those changes that we're making, it is very appreciative that we will have experienced individuals on this board. And all of them, the way we recruit for this board is they work through the local advisory boards of assessment review that we're reinstituting this year. They kind of get their feet wet. They kind of get promoted up to the temporary hearing panels, and then they get promoted up to the full bar. So it's a way for them to kind of gain experience, learn our process, and really know what their duties and responsibilities are.
Great. Thank you. Questions or comments about this? Dan?
Jay, I'm not sure I understand. Would this board interact with the local Board of Assessment reviews?
No, this is the next step. So the local Board of Assessment reviews just makes a recommendation to that 3-person full county Board of Assessment review. So someone could go to the local boards and then they could go to one of these hearing panels. And then the hearing panels makes a recommendation to the full board. Now, one of the full board is on the hearing panels. It's made up of one of the full members and 2 of the hearing panel members. It's kind of a nuance of the law, but the way the law is written, there's only one Board of Assessment review for that assessing unit. And I don't think one board can hear probably the 2,000 grievances that we're going to get this year. So this also allows them to divvy that up and get to a more manageable, 700 or so each.
Got it, thank you.
Great, thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I've made this comment before, but I'll make it again. I'm always impressed with the quality of the people that step up to do this, that we are really fortunate as a community to have as much expertise on this this review board as we do have. I will support the resolution.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, Rich. When I talk to other towns, they have a hard time just finding someone who's willing to breathe or who can breathe and wants to serve on that Board of Assessment review. It's not something fun to sit here from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. the next day, which we have done in the past. And they're not really doing it for money. They're doing it out of their responsibility. And I can't say enough about our board.
That's great. It is wonderful when community members step up to participate in this way as volunteers in particular. All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. Dan?
Yes.
Wait, did we move it?
Yes.
Okay. Dan?
Yes.
Let's see, Rich?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Great, thank you so much, Jay. And I believe that the new legislators, several of whom are here, are looking to meet with department heads, and I would strongly encourage them to sit down with you and get all the rundown of all the different boards and all the different things you do, because I think, personally, I think your department is very complex and you deal with so much. And it's taken me a long time to even begin to understand all the things you do. So I really hope the new legislators will spend some time learning from you.
Yeah, my door is always open. Greg, Travis, Veronica, I don't know if anyone else is there. So if you need anything, give me a yell. I don't know if there is real legislator department head protocol. For me, just call me up, give me a yell, whatever you need, I got you.
All right, great. Let's move along. Next on my list, it just says administration, but I'm not sure what that means. So Lisa?
I don't think I have any business to act on. I can just provide a couple of brief updates to let you know what's going on in our department.
Okay, sure.
So, yesterday was the governor's state of the state, and so we in administration will be assessing and listening closely for the impact to counties. So Deborah and Shauna on the call with NISAC this afternoon or earlier this morning. Also, the change in isolation and quarantine guidance that was adopted by the state, now the county, was issued to the community yesterday. We are in the process of operationalizing that for our county workforce. The spread of Omicron is affecting our workforce as well as many others. So it'll be important to provide clear and consistent guidance to our employees moving forward on that. Working with department heads, we'll be talking about departmental goals for 2022 and trying to see that they align with the legislative committee goals for 2022. So hope to be talking about that at the department head meeting next week. As far as Geo Policy Updates, being that we are down a couple of people in county admin. We haven't been able to be bringing them forward with the frequency that we once were, but we're doing them as necessary. I think in February, we'll be bringing the Green Fleet policy to Geo for review and consideration. Really happy that we'll be able to participate in the new legislature orientation, and thank you, Amanda, for adding us to that doodle poll for that meeting coming up. And we're also in an admin going to be just looking at doing some internal assessment, possibly restructuring, reviewing lines of authority, roles and responsibilities, just to ensure the sustainability of our positions and the workload spread among us, as we've been doing a lot these last few years. So I think that that is called for. So we're going to be looking at that internally as well. So those are our updates.
Great, that's a lot. You've got a lot going on at the beginning of the year. Questions for Lisa? Rich?
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning the state of the state. I heard some of it and I went and looked on the governor's website to look at the details. I'm really happy that there's some emphasis in her, I think 14 different positions, but one of them is ethics reform. She's got two major initiatives, doing term limits for the executive branch, and also totally rebuilding JCOPE from the ground up. And for those who are not familiar with it, that's the Judicial Commission, or the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, which has been a remarkable failure. And we've passed a resolution several years ago asking for the governor to look at that, Governor Cuomo, and he did not. And frankly, I think that's part of the reason he got in trouble. He didn't think he was accountable. And as long as JCOPE is in its current configuration, I think there's some reason to believe that. So I think this committee might consider putting together a resolution we could take to the whole legislature, showing support for this element of the governor's campaign or proposals, not campaign.
All right. Thanks, Rich. Yeah, we are. So as to the onboarding, yeah, it's great, Lisa, that you and Amy and whoever else from your department want to sit down with the new folks. If you got the email from me and you did not fill out the doodle poll yet, please do, so we can get that on our calendars for the end of the month or beginning of February. Okay, anything else for Lisa? All right, thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right, there are so many legislators here because Geo is the best committee. And the next topic, I think, is what everyone wants to talk about. So I don't really have a formal plan. I kind of just want to open it up for discussion. Shauna and Deborah are here to hear what folks have to say, maybe give their opinions if they want to. As we all remember, the final decisions about what committees we have and who's on those committees will be up to the chair. But you know, this is an opportunity to talk about it, give some input. You know, over the past couple of years, the committees have changed back and forth a little bit, and different departments report to different committees. And you know, the goal is to try to streamline our operations, make sure staff aren't ending up going to too many various committees during the month, and just trying to see if we can do things a little bit better. So last month, Rich and Leslie Schill provided a possibility, some things that they had thought through. I don't know if you want to say, maybe start with you, Rich, and say a little bit more about that, if for folks who weren't here last month, and then I would just sort of open it up to conversation and ideas.
Sure. Ultimately, we've heard from our clerks and from the past county administrator. He did an exit interview. And the message we were getting is we have too many committees and our meetings are running too long. And the burden of supporting these committees and attending all of the committee meetings really impacts the ability of department heads and our clerks to get their work done. So what Leslie and I talked about was how could we reconfigure committees to get to a lower number and try to realign how that's done in terms of what each committee is supposed to look at. You know, we made our proposal. Henry, I think you proposed something similar, but along the same lines. It seems entirely doable. There are a couple of temporary committees in 2021 that we don't necessarily need to continue. Tiger and downtown facilities. Downtown facilities seems pretty straightforward to wrap its functions into facilities and infrastructure. Tiger is a little bit more nuanced because it was set up to really look at state and national issues and how they might impact the county and to do some lobbying, essentially. How we divvy that up or keep it, personally, I think there's some value in it. I'm not sure it needs a separate committee. The one remaining issue I've seen is housing. That housing takes a fair amount of focus, and trying to do one planning committee that includes housing tends to exclude the other important work that the planning function looks at, such as environmental issues, sustainability, the green initiatives we have, and larger planning. I'm trying to think of the others, but there's other things that get boxed out. One proposal was to move housing into HSS, and maybe that would work, HHS. So anyway, my preliminary comments. I'm not wedded to anything other than I really think we should make a good effort to try to get to a lower number.
Great, thanks, Rich. All right, who else wants to jump in and give thoughts? Veronica?
This isn't so much a thought as a question, but something that Rich brought up and others was the different current workloads on the committees and the committees as they stand now. And I'm not that familiar with it. So I wonder if it's possible for someone to give a quick rundown on which ones seem light in their current configuration, where the agendas are packed. Like it sounds like housing and economic development is always packed. And downtown.
That's a really good question.
That'd be helpful though.
Yeah, Kathy and Brittany are here too, and they can certainly provide some insight, but the ones that I'm on, I feel like HHS is fairly light. We do sort of the, standard resolutions that we need to, we have, discussions occasionally, but I don't feel like there's a huge workload. There's a lot of departments that report to that committee, but I don't find it, I don't know, looking at Shauna, but I don't find it to be like a very, we don't seem to run over on time ever. I think Geo is amazing and we're perfect. So there's no need to change that. I think peak can go back and forth. Sometimes we have a lot of stuff on the agenda. Sometimes it's very light. I think this year it's tended to be a little bit lighter because a lot of the stuff that was on it was moved to other committees. But other thoughts, Shauna?
Yeah, I think, quite honestly, it depends on the direction of the chair for each of these committees. And some chairs have the philosophy that they want an informational and an educational aspect. And quite honestly, that takes a lot of time. And many times if you have that educational aspect, that can be an hour of your meeting. And the reason why many of our meetings run over. This year, as far as HHS, I have taken out that educational aspect. And we really focused on COVID as well as just straight resolutions. And I've also allowed staff It is not mandatory for their attendance. If they are having a very busy day at work, then they should focus on their work. And if they find value in the meeting, then they can certainly come and add input. But I would never want to make it a requirement, especially whenever I know that they're busy. And so that's personally what I chose to do as chair of HHS. I'm not saying every chair should do that. That's just the way that I chose to run that committee. As far as HED, that was in fact a very long meeting at times. It would go over almost every single meeting, over 2 hours. And it was due to the education / informational aspect of the committee. I'm not sure, quite honestly, in HED, we didn't always pass resolutions. There were some budget adjustments, but there was not, and it was good discussion. But as far as resolutions coming from departments, we really did not pass very many. So that's, just some feedback about HHS and HED.
Okay, great. Henry? Speak loud.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I noticed that, I know years ago when I was on F&I, that F&I was always quite liked. I also noticed that in terms of the reports, F&I has the fewest reports to it. And so, and that's one of the comments I had about Rich's memo, is that they really didn't weigh how busy people are. And so I would also consider that too as very important. Veronica's noting that the committees are not equal in terms of timing. And so that should definitely be considered in terms of any reorganization.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Mike Lane.
Can you folks hear me from here? Okay, I'm sitting back, so I didn't know whether you could hear me. Yeah, F&I varies, Henry. Sometimes it's very busy, and sometimes it isn't. And it depends often on the season or what's happening in the departments that we're working on. I can remember when I first started on the legislature, F&I was probably the busiest. It was what we call Public Works then. It was probably the busiest committee, met twice a month, at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we always had full agendas. We also had an engineering department at that time, which often brought us issues. We had a lot of building projects going on, which we don't have now. But we're about to embark on a building project for the possibility of a county office building. And normally when we have a major building, there is a special committee assigned for that particular building, HHS or mental health or the old jail, or rather the old courthouse when we did those, which I think is important. At this point, since we're not going land speed at building this this county office building, I think it could be in the F&I committee all right. But there are buildings that we have to be considering in F&I, including the existing buildings on Tioga Street. So it's not just though it's a light committee, it's just sometimes like that might be.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Mike Sigler.
So, and I just wanted you to consider, maybe it's not so much the number of committees as much as how many people kind of report to each committee. And do we need a report from every department, every month? I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, I've been on certain committees where we do a lot of educational, like, oh, here's what's going on. And while I find that valuable, I kind of know a lot of that information already because I'm on certain things that kind of provide that information, but other people don't have that information. But is that information, can we put that information to use? I mean, does it inform policy? And I think maybe that's where some of the disconnect comes is, you know, I want to know what planning is doing, but unless planning is doing something, for example, that I need to know about to inform a policy that we're going to put into place, I'm not necessarily sure I need every detail of what they're doing. That's kind of what the department's job is, right? We wouldn't have DSS come in and have, you know, have the department head kind of list every project that's going on in DSS. But if we're going to make a change, like, you know, on how we dole out money, or if the federal government's coming through with a change that we're going to need to take some action on, then yes, that's something we need to do. So I'm not sure it's really the number as much as what we put into each committee. I mean, HHS might seem like, just for the simple fact that we get a COVID report pretty much every meeting. If we didn't, I would have a lot of faith that HHS would be having that discussion in a lot more depth. But since we're getting it at every meeting, maybe that's taking some of the workload, not workload, but we're already in the loop. So it's kind of like, why do the loop twice kind of idea. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on it.
Great, thank you. Ann Corman? You there, Ann? There we go.
Yeah, thank you. So I've gone back and forth. I know I keep hearing one of the biggest reasons that we're considering this is the staff, the clerk's time, and I don't know if we want to hear from them. I'll leave that up to to Amanda, the chair of this committee, but or maybe we've talked to them separately. I know at least we have some, but so I'm just wondering, as people have said, sometimes you have a lot with a certain committee and sometimes you don't. I also know as the chair, I was the chair of WDIC and now the chair of PEAK. So I know for PEAK, we have been fairly light this year, usually finishing within the 2 hours, sometimes 1 hour, hour and a half at most, I would say. But it's also, to me, about staying in touch with those departments, you know, and liaison committees, which are not listed when I'm looking up. You know, I have 2 lists here in front of me, like who reports to them. And then there's a separate list I have for what advisory boards report to them and advise them. And so to me as a chair, I think that's one of my duties, is to stay in touch with those departments, stay in touch with those boards. I try to attend some of the board meetings. And I've told the boards that report, for instance, to PEAK, that I know because of COVID, things have been rough, but I really want them to report more and to work more with PEAK, because I mean, that's what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to just go off and do their own thing. They need to align with our goals. We need to align with we need to know what their goals are and align with them, and hear what they're doing. So so right now, I guess I'm going on the side of wondering, you know, if we are thinking about getting rid of HED, we're already saying getting rid of 2 committees, temporary committees, I think, which will help. But to get rid of another full committee, which a lot of boards and departments report to, I'm not sure that's the right thing right now. So that's where I'm standing.
Okay, great, thanks, Ann. Henry.
Yes, I'd also like to discuss two other items. One, Jason Molino also focused on his attendance at every committee meeting, because it was in person, and you know the thought was that he would attend every committee meeting, and he fought back against that. It wasn't really the numbers of committees, it was the committees he was attending. And he used to attend every committee meeting. And so that was also some of the tension that, and plus, when we attended meetings in person, you couldn't like be like Rick Snyder right now, who is observing this meeting but not attending it. And so with Zoom, it does make a difference where people, can come in for a 10-minute period as opposed to staying there for the entire time. And so I think that also has to be considered, whether or not, again, and we discussed this in various committee meetings, whether or not people should come every meeting. And so that there's also that concern. I also want to raise an issue that I know I've talked to some people about is the staffing. We know that staffing, we know there are 3 people now working in the clerk's office, and whether we can, instead of then getting rid of committees, we can add staff. And so again, I did some checking, and I'll send an email out and about other committees, other counties surrounding us. And the closest one I found was Broome County, which had 15 legislators, 7 standing committees, but 5 staff members. And so again, whether or not we should just add a part-time staff person, because again, really the addition here is the video component. 2, that we have the new video component, and I'm not sure what that media position is going to be, but whether it will help the staff deal with the video. Because again, they've taken on extra duties. And so they should have extra staff to be able to deal with that. And so I'll send an email out about that. But again, I think that we should consider that. It's just not the absolute number of committees that Jason was talking about. It was the committees he was attending.
Thanks, Henry. I would look to Kathy and Brittany. You technically can still have 4. Do you have a 4th position that you could fill? Now Michelle is gone, but
we have 1 position and we
okay, so they have a 4th position that technically will end at the end of this year. So you could have 1 other person for a year unless that were to be changed. Okay. Okay, Deborah.
Yeah, Henry raises a good point. I think the staff concern that we most immediately want to address is the burden on our legislative clerical staff of attending, broadcasting, writing minutes, for all of our meetings. And that's certainly something that we'll be considering. I do think you've all raised some interesting issues about the philosophy of our meetings. Shauna and I met with Katie Borgella yesterday because the committees that DPS reports to are the most problematic ones, just because they're scattered all over. DPS has such a broad portfolio. And we wanted to ask her how she felt about reporting to multiple committees. It was an interesting meeting, but she also brought up the problem with the informational orientation of some of our meetings versus task orientation. And this, we're hearing this from numerous sources. My feeling is that we have to find a sweet spot, because if this were not a year in which we had 5 new legislators who need time to become educated about what all of our departments do and what all of our committees need to be heard on, it would be easy to say, okay, we're just going to be very task oriented for the time being until we get the clerical staff issue resolved. But I don't think that would be fair to the new people. So I think we're going to have to try to find a sweet spot for all of our committees between being too informational and not task focused enough, and serving the tasks that need to be served without taking inordinate amounts of time in everyone's schedule. That's going to be hard to do. One of the things that I've observed from serving on PDEC, HED, and PEAK is that, for example, HED gets an STPB report either every month or semi-monthly or every 2 months.
Every 2 months.
Okay, so it's a fairly meaty report. I'm just using that as an example. I don't mean to pick on STPB, but I think that it's incumbent on committee members when they get a report like that to really read the thing. And if they have questions, bring their questions. It shouldn't be necessary for the accountable to put together a multi-page report 6 times a year and then have to walk the committee through it in the meeting and then answer questions. So, that's the sort of thing that it is going to require an additional commitment of time and effort on our part as legislators and committee members. But I think there are ways that we can absorb the information in those reports and come with our questions and not require, an extra 10 minutes of time to have ourselves walk through the report orally. And, if you multiply that times all of the reports that are included in our agenda packets, that would make our meetings significantly more efficient. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. As you were talking, I was just thinking too, one thing that I don't know, I haven't attended all the committees, but that could help with staff is if all of the actual voting business was first in the meeting. So go through all the resolutions, your appointments, your minutes, all of that stuff, and then do your presentations or your, updates from department heads where, if other department heads need to leave or people don't want to participate in the presentation from some organization, they could leave. I think that's how Geo does it. And
Oh, of course.
The crown jewel of committees.
the crown jewel of committees, that's right. We do have, reports from the various administration people, but there also are direct reports to the legislature. So I kind of feel like at Geo anyway, I want them to be coming and, usually they're very short, here's what's going on. So I feel like I do want them to keep coming, but I don't, we don't need Jay Franklin to come every time or Maureen Reynolds. There's other department heads, folks who we only ask the Board of Elections to come when there's something we want to learn about. So that's another way to do it. You could have a couple of your core department heads who are there, and then other folks can come and go. So, Devin.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing for the benefit of our new legislators. Rich referred to this, and it's the problem of housing and where we're going to put housing. When the now sophomore class started on the legislature, housing was a big hot issue, even probably hotter than it is now. And what had happened in the years just before we started and the first year that we were on the legislature is that everything was in PDEC, which was planning, development, and environmental quality, including housing. And housing eclipsed everything. And so there were a lot of environmental and climate issues and the peripheral things like the Water Resources Council and the Environmental Management Council that got very short shrift. And so in our second year, we split things off between HED and PEAK in order to give those issues that had been ignored more attention. It seems as we considered what we should do about housing, that there are some issues that we ought to consider in terms of what can the county actually do about our housing supply. You know, our major concern has always been the fact that housing's not affordable. And there are some special factors with the students and just the economic drivers of construction that make that a particularly difficult topic for us. There's not a lot the county can do. Putting it in HED and treating housing as an economic development issue doesn't really address our problem. And the only, you know, we were talking to Katie yesterday, she pointed out that the only mechanism that the county actually has to encourage like workforce housing or market rate housing is the Community Housing Development Fund. And to some extent, the IDA. But, well, but code enforcement's not a county issue. It could be, yes, not yet. That's right. So that raises the question of where do we put housing? And as Rich mentioned, one of the places it could live, and where to some extent it already does live, is in HHS, because that's the committee that deals with the spectrum of housing, continuum of care that runs from street homelessness pretty much through low income and into workforce housing. And that's where we actually might be able to do something. So I just wanted to give the new people some background on how the housing issue really drives a lot of our, or has driven a lot of our committee structure, just so that you understand what's going on.
Thanks. Great. Thank you. Henry and then Greg.
Yeah, I just want to mention that Deb mentioned HED with tourism. I also see the model as IDA, which also reported to HED twice every other month. Heather would do a 4-page report, and then she'd come to the meeting, say any questions, and that was it. And so that was my ideal of having the reports being done by everybody before a committee meeting, and submitting it to the, and doing it that way. Also with housing, I think that, you know, it doesn't fit anywhere. Also, there's the concern that it like workforce. Well, the workforce development is in housing, is in the HED department. And the IDA is also in the HED department. And so many of the other associated things with housing is also in economic development. And so there's also that issue.
All right, thank you, Henry. Greg.
Yeah, so my question with housing, because I think there's two pieces based on what I heard Deb say, because there's actually getting the housing built, and then there's the operation of those units, right? Which I think falls a lot into that continuum of care. You know, making sure that the infrastructure is there to support that transition through the different, you know, phases of housing. The other thing is, and some of those other mechanisms are, how do we get more bricks and sticks in the ground to have more units available so that we can have those type of programs? So does housing necessarily have to be like all or nothing in one bucket or the other, or can the different aspects be split between different committees?
That is a good question.
Because I think one of the things that, you know, that I'm sort of hung up on is just trying to wrap my head around some of the economic levers that can be pulled to support housing and development in the county versus some of those purpose-built units that provide support to, the sort of the various points along that continuum of care. So that's where I'm having a hard time putting all of it in one bucket, and I think it sort of lives in two different places and is complementary to each other.
Thank you. Anne?
Thanks. Thanks for letting me speak again. Just thinking some more about this as far as workforce, jobs, living wage jobs. I mean, there's so many things about jobs, being able to afford the housing here. So for me, thinking more about it, having housing, jobs, and economic development all together, where a committee of people are in touch with those things and thinking about those things all together, because they affect each other, quite a bit. If we're talking about, okay, the housing, we get the housing snapshot, here's what housing costs. Okay, we need to not just have more affordable housing, we need to have better jobs. So that it just seems like you pull one lever and it affects something else. So if it's all together, I'm really right now leaning towards having that together. I think as we have it now, it doesn't, as far as, I'll let the planning department speak for themselves, but it does, if you move just the housing part to the HHS committee, it does, as far as I can tell, it doesn't alleviate them having to report to two committees still, peak and housing, or HHS, because they deal with housing issues. So the way we have it now was split up with issues more around homelessness and the services that people need in that aspect. Staying in HHS seems appropriate to me. And even though I will say the last 2 years, especially the last year, I think a lot of the committees, as people said, we're trying to streamline them, partly because of COVID. And so maybe that's something that we can continue to go forward, so that we don't have to have people do full reports as people have said. But really, I'm just thinking of those three things are so combined: our economic activity, housing, and jobs. And going forward, these are going to be, those three things are going to be huge issues as environmental issues. When we get the CLCPA, there could be a lot more for PEAK to do when we get that set up through the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Rich?
Yeah, just to add to what we might see this year, I've started reading the City Continuum of Care report on the homeless encampments, and I anticipate there's going to be issues that are going to spill over to the county. Almost there have to be if we're going to have any success in changing the status quo. So, looking at, when we say housing, we mean something very specific, as Deborah pointed out. I think it's going to be busy this year. Just saying.
Mike Lane and then Shauna.
I want to talk about the communication committees. We know we have the chair's reports at our regular legislative meetings that gives you a taste of what's been going on in the committee. We used to have coverage of each committee by our public information officer. And there would be a press release usually after each committee meeting indicating the highlights of what was going on there. The public information officer was originally started to be a service for the legislature and its committees when we hired Wendy Skinner years ago. Later, Marshall Lynch took on the job. Jason wanted to change that and take basically control of that position. And when Marshall left, he hired Dominic, and I don't think there's any harder worker we have in the county than Dominic right now. It basically was they stopped doing the coverage of the committees. And I don't want to mix it up with COVID because COVID is such a gorilla in the room here, and Dominic's had to do so much for that. But I think eventually we got to get back to having coverage of our committees. And we used to be able to read the highlights when they be sent out as press releases. The newspapers would often pick them up and print them verbatim, those press releases. And I think that it needs that position, or some form of that position needs to get back to servicing the committees of the legislature again.
All right, good point. Thanks, Mike. That's a little bit of a different sideline topic, but maybe that's something we can talk a little bit more about this year. Geo. Shauna.
Yeah, so I think that is interesting, Mike, and I think if we're thinking that's a good idea, then that might be another position that we add. To have, a part-time person or a full-time person, whatever it would mean, to attend all of our meetings and do press releases. And I would certainly entertain that idea. As far as the homelessness topic, one thing that I think is going to be very important about the county engaging in conversation on the encampments and homelessness is the county has absolutely no law enforcement that should be involved in the encampments. That is in the city. And quite honestly, I don't think that this should be a situation that we deal and have law enforcement come in and deal with. The action that the county can have in working with people that are unhoused can be that through social services, and it should be that through social services. We have 40 different nonprofits that are working with our homeless population right now in Tompkins County, and they are the ones that are going to help the people that are living in the jungle, that are living off of State Street. And so I just want to really throw that out there, because I don't want us to head down a bad situation and a negative road, because I really don't think the conversation needs to entail law enforcement for our homeless population.
Shauna, if I could respond to that, I agree with you.
Rich, you can, but we're kind of getting off topic here, so.
Yeah, but just in terms of housing and the issues related to homelessness, it's not public safety, it's housing, in the HHS sense. But it will impact lots of county departments, whether we want it to or not. And the message I've gotten from several city directions is that they'd like the county to just pick up the problem and pay for it. And,
Well, of course they would.
yeah, and
Rich.
yeah,
That's not true, Rich.
well, somewhat
All right,
true.
Okay, folks, we're getting off track here.
But if you're looking at the encampments, you're looking at substance abuse issues, you're looking at mental health issues that are going to fall to the county, and the housing issue. Like it or not, I don't think it impacts our law enforcement so much, although I think we've just been plain lucky down there that we haven't had some really bad incidents given the state of what's there right now. But the other elements, the county's going to need to take positions on, is what I was saying.
I agree. All right. Thank you for taking us down different roads here. Is there any more thoughts or comments or questions about the committee structure or anything else related? I think we've covered a lot. Most everyone has given their thoughts. It's appreciated. Veronica, wrap it up for us.
Well, I'll briefly, because I know you're trying to get off this, but about the housing homelessness thing, I don't have a proposal or where it should go, but I do think that splitting, I hear how the like intimate connection between housing and jobs and economic development, the construction of housing. But I think there's some danger in like separating that, not necessarily in the committee structure, but maybe in our minds, from homelessness, because like ultimately, how do we address homelessness? It's with homes, right? So it's with houses. And I think, you know, I don't know the complications of everyone's situation, but I think a lot of people who living in the encampments have maybe attempted to be or have been offered like houses to live in through social services that don't work for them for whatever reason. So if the services trying to address that don't also access and intersect, and we're not thinking about it in terms of what's being constructed, that's like, we're setting up a system that, or maintaining a system that like requires that homelessness is just always gonna be part of it. And maybe it will, but it probably doesn't have to be that way. So I just want that thought to be in there.
Thank you, Veronica. Deborah is insisting on speaking.
Yeah, that's me. No, just one little thing. I agree with you, Veronica. And I also just wanted to say that just because housing lives, for example, in HHS, doesn't mean that a PDEP committee or an HED committee can't factor in the impact of the lack of affordable housing on our workforce development efforts and our, you know, economic growth. I mean, our committees are not that segmented, so just bear with me.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap, and you know, we can have joint meetings of committees, or you know, people can attend other committees at any time. So there's a lot of overlap for sure. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Shauna and Deborah have heard all the good thoughts and taken a few notes, and I know they're meeting with legislators in the next week or so to start thinking more about this. So thank you. Thank you. So I forgot to add something to the agenda, which I want to do right now before we get into the next topic. It shouldn't take too long. Travis came to me asking about a conference that he'd like to attend. So this is going to be our first opportunity to exercise our Geo committee process of hearing from a legislator what conference they'd like to attend, tell us a little bit about it. And this is all spelled out in the Rule 14 that we revised a year or two ago. And Geo isn't necessarily here to give, like to say yes or no, you can attend this conference. It's more of, I think, a way for a legislator to publicly say, I would like to attend this conference. If Travis is coming to us saying he wants to attend a, you know, poetry, creative writing conference, which I personally would love, we might say, you know, that's not really the best use of county resources. So Geo's role is to just give some guidance and say, you know, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. Because ultimately we're all accountable to our constituents, right? We're not, we have to explain our actions to people who vote for us. So on that note, Travis has a conference he'd like to attend, and would you like to tell us about it?
Sure, thank you. I would like to attend the New York State Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Conference in February. It's an opportunity to be around folks of color who are working on and addressing issues specifically that you know, plague or affect the communities of color. So it would be good for networking. It'd be great to understand what other folks are working on, innovative ideas and programs, and actually be around folks who look like me. So it's the 51st annual one in February. Hopefully they'll still have it. We'll see.
Sounds great. Where is it happening?
It's happening in Albany, New York.
Okay, and they're doing it even with COVID?
Right now it's still on, so hopefully it'll still happen.
Great, and I think you mentioned the cost to me in your email, but I can't remember what it was.
I believe it's $530 plus lodging.
Okay, great. I did send out an email to everyone just to sort of recap of the process of getting reimbursements and how that works, and sort of this whole process. I would welcome any thoughts from other committee members or other legislators about the conference that Travis is proposing. It sounds like a good one and relevant to our county work to me, but I'm open to hearing other thoughts.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, Veronica's nodding.
Yeah, I'm nodding as well.
Excellent. All right, well, that's sort of your sort of approval from us. Go for it. Check in with Kathy and Katrina and Brittany, and they can help you figure out, getting signed up and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And thank you for giving us the opportunity to test out our new rule system here. This is great.
Not a problem. And just so I've been out of work the last 2 days sick.
Oh.
I did take a COVID test yesterday and a home test today, and they're all negative. So I don't want anybody worrying, especially Dan and Mike. And so I'm COVID free. I think it's just a seasonal thing.
Yeah, okay.
Travis, if that changes, please let me know. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll let you all know.
Okay, we'll feel better. Mike?
I just want to point out, if there's $1,000 allocated, I don't know whether Travis was thinking about NISAC or not. I just wanted him to think about that from the dollar wise, what might be available.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you were able to hear what Mike said, but just, for everyone's, purposes, yeah, we have $1,000. Each legislator has $1,000 allocated this calendar year. Probably this conference, Travis would eat up a lot of your $1,000, which would make it harder for you to attend other conferences, but that's absolutely your decision. If that's, how you want to use your allocation, that's totally fine. Kathy has the thought?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, also the lodging and the travel expenses come out of the same budget line. So.
Right, so your travel or your, gas reimbursement or hotel, couple nights in a hotel would be included in that $1,000. Rich?
Yeah, just a question. Is NISAC in person? Is that the plan at present?
So as of the last Tiger meeting, that was the plan.
Okay, and I saw Shauna and Deborah sent out an invitation from NISAC for a series of onboarding online seminars for new legislators. That looked pretty interesting.
Yeah, there was one that Amy shared that I think maybe Greg had signed up for, I'm not sure, but yeah, I think there's other possibilities of onboarding as well. Anne?
Thanks. I'm just wondering if, say, especially,
Granison at 342.
Oh, Anne, there we go. Thank you. Go ahead, Anne.
Just wondering if, especially, I don't know if this would happen because the legislators, are new, if there's more things that they want to attend the first year or two and say they go over and go over their $1,000 before we do the reallocation in, I think it's August or September, that could they get retroactively reimbursed later if they go over, say I only use $400 or $500 and they go over before Does that make sense, the question I'm asking?
That does make sense. I have no idea what the answer is. I think we'd have to talk about it and ask maybe Rick or Kathy. That's not something that we've ever faced before, so I'm not really sure what the answer would be. But it's a legitimate question, so let's think more on that.
Thank you.
Can I just add one more comment that I believe NISAC, for new legislators, the registration fee is waived for the spring conference. We'll still have to pay for lodging and other travel expenses. I believe the registration is waived.
Oh, well, that's cool. Great, thank you. Veronica?
Well, that might make my point moot, but I was just going to say, like, Travis, if it is this conference or NISAC, just based on what you described, this sounds really cool and special and, like, you know, going to give you, like, having the networking opportunities with people in similar roles who look like you said, that you're not going to get as much of here. And I'm sure others of us, whoever goes, can report back from NISAC.
Definitely.
So I'd be excited for you to go to this.
Yeah, yeah, I would too. And hear more about it when you would come back. Rich and then Greg?
Yeah, I would certainly entertain a proposal if somebody wanted to make it to amend our stipend on a 4-year basis to allow a slightly greater amount for new legislators so that they don't miss NISAC, even if they want to take advantage of something else.
Okay.
Particularly because the registration fee is waived. So it really is just the lodging and travel.
Right. Greg?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I got a welcome packet or something from NISAC, and it definitely confirmed the registration fee being waived for first-time legislators. And then I had to jump off early, but the 5-module training, I tried to sit in a little bit of today, which was about the structure of county government in New York State, and sort of walk through the history. I'm really hoping they'll, like, post the recording of it online, because I think it's really great information just for anybody and a good refresher. But it's every Thursday at 10, like I think Shauna mentioned. Super easy to register. It's a go-to meeting. And the topics are budget and finance, ethics and government, adopting local laws and open government laws, and then the role of the clerks of the legislature and NISAC services. So some really good stuff, and it was done in a format that you can kind of have it on in the background and pay attention to, and you know, take what you need from it.
Cool, it sounds great. Rich?
I'm going to take my own advice, and I would move an amendment to our policy to allow payment of actual housing costs or lodging costs for new legislators to attend NISAC to not count against their $1,000 stipend. Was that clear?
Sort of.
What I want is, I don't want them to be budgeting to say, well, I won't go to NISAC because I'm doing this other thing. I think to get off the ground well, the more training they can get, the better. But NISAC is so core. I would not want anybody to skip NISAC because they use the money elsewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we have time to figure that out without having to make a motion right now. Can we, like, because we would need to say where would that come from, and I don't know what other folks want to do. Okay.
I couldn't hear Dan.
Sorry, I'm supportive of the idea, but I think we should wait to flesh out the details.
Okay, that's fine. Let's think on it. But again, I think we want to encourage our new legislators to attend, and we don't want a financial impediment to stop them, especially because they're getting free registration.
Okay. Yes. Veronica?
I like that idea. Thank you, Rich. And had the same question about where the money would come from. But mostly I'm talking just to say I have to leave in a minute, unfortunately, to go to my other job. So apologies for that, and thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. So I'll follow up. We can talk a little bit more about what that would look like, what exactly we need to say, and where the money would come from. Because if people want to go to NISAC, they should, the new folks, they should definitely feel like they can do that. All right, excellent. Okay, let's move on to our next discussion topic. Cell phone reception in Tompkins County, which is brought to us by Dan Klein.
Thank you. I thought that's why all the legislators were at this meeting to hear about this.
All
right. Thank you for putting this topic on the agenda. I'm going to run through a couple of little strands and then leave it all together in what I'm actually hoping to happen next. So for me, this started about 6-ish months ago, maybe. I've been doing a lot of work. I've been in touch with the broadband issue a lot. It's something that's very important to me. My district is one of the broadband challenged districts in the county. And I was talking with a constituent about it, and she told me this story. She was right on the Caroline-Danby border. She's telling me this story about her husband having a medical emergency. And not only didn't they have internet, but their landline was out, as often happens. In fact, they had gotten rid of the landline, so it was no longer functional. And they couldn't get cell phone reception home. So her husband's having a medical issue, a medical emergency. She had to hop in the car, drive half a mile away, find a place with decent reception, make a phone call to get medical intervention. Everything worked out okay in her case. And when I spoke to her, I said, you're making an important point to me, that this cell phone reception issue is not just a nuisance like it is for me at my house, because I don't get cell phone reception either, but this is very real, and that I promised her that I was going to try to advance this issue. So spent some time looking around and talking to people. I just want to report a few little odds and ends. One is that shortly after that, the FCC released some new maps that showed cell phone reception coverage nationwide. And I was directed to this from our planning department and worked with Greg Potter at our ITS department and eventually got a look at these maps. And it turns out that these maps are not helpful at all. They basically show the entire county has coverage, cell phone coverage. And we just know it's not true. And there were a couple of people specifically that went in and located their houses that they know don't have cell phone reception on this FCC map, and it didn't add up. So that turned out to be not a helpful tool that was provided. And then I found out that there had been a upstate New York task force. Let me get the correct name here. It's the New York Upstate Cellular Coverage Task Force report. It was issued just about a month ago, and it was a report that was led by the New York State Broadband Program Office. They issued a 74-page report. It was about the issue in all upstate New York. It concentrated on the Adirondacks and the Catskills. It was for the whole state. I read the entire report. It was very interesting. I learned a lot, but as you might imagine, it's one of those things where the more you learn, the more you realize it's very complicated, very expensive. A lot of different ways to think about it and look at it and aim your target of what you're trying to solve. And it's also very technical, and there's also a lot that I don't know. But one thing that I'm willing to tell you more about that report if you want, but one thing I can tell you in particular is that they stated on 3 different occasions over the report about the inadequacy of the maps that are available to us. So, quote, FCC maps overstated actual coverage, unquote. Another quote, the coverage maps that are presented to consumers by private companies are designed for marketing purposes and do not tend to reflect actual coverage, close quotes. In another discussion of it, the FCC in 2018 had announced this plan of expanding cell phone coverage in rural areas all over the country. And they invited challenges to the maps that they had generated. So a challenge means they invited people to ground truth it, to actually go and test to see if they were getting reception in the areas that said they had reception. And the report says, quote, there were in fact significant overstatements in coverage from some carriers. It would not be prudent to rely on these maps as a representation of coverage in upstate New York. So the reason that I'm emphasizing the map quotes is because what I'm leading up to here is a map project. Before I get there, I just want to tell you a few more little strands. I read something that our New York State Senator, or one of the New York State Senators from Tompkins County, Senator Oberacker, talked about that he recognizes cell phone reception as a significant issue here. That's an issue he wants to work on. I have reached out to his office and I have not heard back yet. So I don't know if there's anything behind that, but that is just another strand I'm following. And then finally, I had a little discussion with Point Broadband, is one of the local internet providers in this county. And for reasons I can go into or not, the cell phone issue is related to the broadband issue on several ways, mostly for infrastructure, because both require fiber, communications fiber. Anyway, what he told me was that he's considering launching a local phone service, for lack of a better term. I should put that in quotes. And that there's a lot of different forms it could take. I'm not going to say anything more about it now because there is really nothing more to say about it now, except to say that all of this feeds into the same starting point for me, which is we need a good map in this county of where the coverage is and where the coverage is not. So here's my idea for doing that. My idea is to do a survey of residents and have them report self-reported reception, cell phone reception. And if we can collect enough data points, we can generate a map of where the reception is in this county and where it's not. And so I talked with Greg Potter in our ITS department and asked him about the feasibility of having that survey be based on a web page. And he gave me a lot of feedback and a lot of ideas. And we ended up spending a little bit of time working with the ITS department to generate a model of what this might look like. And so it's a very simple web page. And this is what would happen. A resident would go to this web page, they would enter their address, and that would put a dot on a map. They would tell what carrier they're using, and they would self-rate their cell phone reception on, say, a scale of 1 to 5. And if enough people did that, it would generate a map that showed where reception is. So ITS went ahead and made a prototype of that website. It's not live, but it is constructed. And what I'm looking for is a nod of consent from this committee that this sounds like a good idea to let this website go live. And if it does, what I'm going to ask for next is all of your help and using all the county resources we have to publicize this website and invite residents to place their data point on this map that will be developed. So that's my pitch, and Greg Potter's here, and I can answer questions, Greg can answer questions, or whatever. Thank you.
All right, good pitch.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing this up and looking into it. Rich is raising his hand.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for bringing it up. I guess initial reactions, this was a function that was conducted by the company I used to work for. You know, the ads that used to be prevalent, can you hear me now? Intertech participated in those testing programs, and they were fairly technically sophisticated, at least at the time. And there's lots of factors that can impact cell phone coverage. You may get useful data, but you might also get data that's influenced by the types of phones, by the carrier, by the structure of the house or hills around them, that may make the data that not entirely reliable. I guess I'd like to hear Greg on that. And then my other question is this a county function? Is this something we should be doing? Maybe, but I'm wondering, should the towns be doing this? Because it's geographical and it is based in a town setting. It's, anyway, my initial thoughts.
All right, thank you, Rich. Greg, do you have thoughts about Rich's question?
Sure. We've been involved countywide in a different cell phone coverage project called FirstNet, which is aimed towards first responders. And so I sat on a New York State board, and that contract at the federal level went to AT&T. And so what they've done is they've prioritized the service and for that particular type of use, and have guaranteed the additional coverage for underserved areas in the county. So there's already some work that we've done at the countywide level to improve cell phone and data coverage across the county with AT&T. So having said that, I don't know what it means, but I just want to give you some background information on that. How the question is asked in a system that Dan and my GIS crew initially worked at is critical. And I think it goes to your point, Rich. I have not looked at the details of how that survey was drafted, but those are important questions if we move forward, is what kind of information are you collecting from the public in Tompkins County to be meaningful in the future? And I don't have an answer for that right now. And I think also one other point is that for me, this is more about figuring out where the bigger holes are for lack of coverage in the county than where the coverage is now, because that's the exception. We generally know where they are because of our support of mobile users in the law enforcement community. So we have a generalized map of where not to expect coverage. But the maps that Dan is referring to are modeled maps, and they're not accurate down to the residential locations. We generally know where those holes are across, major roads in the county. So we can alert the sheriff's department where not to expect coverage, but we have not gone down to the residential, private property level. And I think it's very similar to what the planning department is working for an inventory at the address level for broadband coverage, but this would be for cell phone coverage, which is a little bit different.
Great, thanks, Greg. Anne, and then Henry.
Thank you. You're talking about cell phone. I'm gonna just pull it back a little bit regarding just phone service. Some of the things that I've heard in my municipality and then flowing over through into Newfield. So Ulysses, Enfield, and Newfield is that a lot of folks, for instance, still don't have reliable home phone service. And even if they have reliable home phone service, most people have phones now that you plug in for electricity. So the phone needs electricity plus the phone line, so that during a power outage, they have no home phone. I keep, which I recommend to people, but not everybody has one of these. I keep one of my older phones that, that was a push button one, but that didn't need electricity, so that I can still call NYSEG, and now I have a cell phone, so I can use the cell phone to call NYSEG. But so it just kind of leaves people in a lurch of, okay, the power's out. If your home phone doesn't work, if you have a good home phone, you need a cell phone. And if you're in an area, many of these areas that don't have cell phone service, you can't even call to say your power's out, and you can't call or look online. Your internet is out if your power's out, because your router's out, and then you can't even look online or find out when the power is predicted to be restored. So, and a lot of people that I talk to still have home phones. I mean, not as many, it's getting less and less. And one of the two big reasons that they say they still, because I say, well, why don't you just go to cell phones? And people say that it's the reception, so the service, also the price, because then everybody pretty much has to have a cell phone in the house. So then that increases the cost. A lot of elderly folks just don't want to deal with the cell phone, so they want to use the home phone because of technological reasons. And then the other reason is because they have kids. The kids come home from school, they need a home phone. So because they're not going to give, young kids each their own cell phone. So just want to put that in there. So thanks for working on this and bringing this to our attention, Dan.
Great, thanks, Anne. Henry?
Yes, thank you, Dan. I was wondering, just looking forward, if you have a map, then what do you do? If you have an accurate map of where there's no cell phone service, then what do you do?
Yeah, so Henry, that's a good point. So this 74-page report that was just issued doesn't really have an answer either. There's no quick, easy answer. Money will solve everything, but that's not, that's not practical necessarily. So I just want to be clear that I am not proposing that the county engage in a long-term process to solve this issue, because I don't know what it's going to take to solve the issue. What I am proposing, and what I do know for sure, is the first step in this issue is getting a scope of how widespread the problem is. So I don't have much of an answer at all for you, but I'm not even proposing that we look that far. I'm certainly not asking the county to commit to any long-term action. And Henry, at some point, I can give you a little more information about what some solutions might look like, including some proposed federal and state programs. But that is like 3 or 4 steps ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Yeah, I just wanted to state, not just the process-wise, this is a great example of where departmental goals and committee goals we should be looking at aligning, and just in terms of utilizing our resources in the best way possible, and looking at what is on the plate of our department's ITS planning, and what the goals and the will of the legislature are moving forward. So I'm not determining one way or another, or saying that this is or isn't a valuable use of time, but just wanting to take that into consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And to Rich's question of is this something that the county should be looking at? I mean, I personally feel like it is. I mean, we have resources and staff who understand this and are able to work on it. I think, shuffling it off to the towns is not necessarily going to get anything done. So, and I think Lisa's point is a good one. We're at the beginning of the year here. I'm sure Greg and his team are thinking about what they're going to be working on this year, as other departments are. And at our next Geo meeting, I'm going to, ask you all what things you want to work on here over the coming year, assuming I get to still be chair of the best committee. So yeah, I mean, it would be good if, if this committee was able to say, yes, this is something we want to, look into, and if that fits into IT's, plans and what they're doing, then that would be ideal. Rich?
Yeah, I guess my concern remains, as Henry stated, is what's the outcome? What's the action that we would be looking to take, if any? Maybe there isn't one. It's just in the good to know category. But I'd like us to map that out a bit before we do a mapping exercise. I'd like to understand, do we think this is going to end up with county money doing something, say, to put up cell phone towers or encourage cell phone providers to change their coverage plans? I don't know. Should New York State be doing this? It sounds like they have a task force working on it already. Is this in their wheelhouse? If not the towns. I would not like us to set up expectations with all these people who are responding to a survey to then turn around and say, okay, county, now do something. I don't know what that is. So Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Mike Sigler?
I apologize if I repeat some stuff. I've had some internet drop off, but I would just suggest you bring in Lee Shirtliff into this discussion for the simple fact that, I mean, he was the one that set up really the 911 system. It's my understanding we have line of sight everywhere in the county. So if it's a matter of us leasing out space to cell phone companies to put up cell phone sites, I mean, we have the infrastructure to do that. I know we've done that on certain towers, so I don't know where we are with that, but again, that's my understanding, that we have line of sight everywhere. So just something to keep in mind.
Thank you, Mike. Dan?
First, two things. Greg, can you speak to what you visualize, what you imagine as if this were to go forward, what kind of time commitment or work from your department this would entail?
Sure. Yeah, I think, Dan, we have the ability to help in this and to create the website and the mapping interface to collect the information. And I think we're 80% of the way there with work that we've already done. So I don't think that on our load, on our side, it's going to be a big lift. And I appreciate Lisa's comment earlier about trying to collectively get our goals in line. But this is one project we're able to pick up pretty quickly and run with based on the circumstances here and someone's availability of time. So I think we're in pretty good shape to help out with this if you decide to move forward.
Thank you, Greg. Rich, I just want to address it again. I'm not sure I understand the idea of saying we recognize this is a big problem, but we're not even willing to take one step on it because we don't know what the fourth step is. That doesn't make much sense to me. I do think this is very parallel to the broadband study, which is it's very parallel. We're doing the same thing there. We are trying to map it out. Do we have a solution for everything? We actually don't. And that was one of my complaints, if you remember, when that conversation came up. But nevertheless, we are taking that first step of mapping it out. I don't think there's much debate that mapping the scope of the problem is the first step in addressing a problem. And that's all, 100% all that I'm asking the county to do. And again, what might future steps be? Yes, there might be a state program to address this issue. There might be a federal program. There have been 2 proposed federal programs in the last 4 years, both of which have been abandoned, but they might come through again. There are some other things I can tell you. It's a 74-page report. Had some ideas, and I'm happy to share it with you. I'm happy to share it. I wrote up a 2-page summary. I can send that around. But I'm not asking us to do any of those things. I'm asking us to take step 1 and identifying where the gaps are so that we can ask the very next question is there anything else we can do to try to solve this problem?
Okay. I don't know where we're going, but I guess there isn't a tremendous harm in putting the website live. Just so long as we're clear about expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure an average Tompkins County resident would say, oh, they're asking what my cell phone reception is. That means they're going to fix it. They might, I don't know, if we're clear about we're just trying to make a map. I mean, I think people can understand that. And then, going forward from there, we'll see, when we put this out there, and if we're able to create a map, seems like we would kind of figure out the next steps then. Considering that this isn't going to, right now, cost any money, I'm not sure what the harm in it is. Henry?
Yes, Dan, are there you talked about that 70-page report. Are there other groups in the state who are mapping?
So this report was, like I said, led by the New York State Broadband Office. And this report had some suggestions of how to go next. And one of their suggestions Yes, so they had asked for, in this report, they had asked for further mapping. But that's not a plan, that was just a recommendation of what should be done next. There's also, as I mentioned briefly, there were 2 federal programs. One was in 2017 and one was in 2019 that were supposed to start to take on this issue. Both of them have been abandoned. Both of these projects have been abandoned. So the idea has come up, but there's nothing, and the idea has been recommended, but no, there's not actually anything in place right now.
And just to make sure that the reason why the current mapping is bad, I know the FCC for broadband uses one house in a census tract. What's the issue with the FCC mapping currently? Why do they over coverage? Why do they over-cover things?
I'm not sure the answer. I've been wondering about that myself. I know that one of their things that they pointed out was marketing, that the private companies generate these maps for marketing purposes, not for, planning purposes for planners. But I don't know if there's more to it than that. I really don't.
Maybe Greg has an answer. He put his hand up.
Yeah, I do. The mapping information, the data comes from the private sector. So they recently, the FCC came to an agreement with the major providers to publicly release that information. And that's what's leading to our ability to present that in the mapping interface that we do. In the past, when we tried to work with the major coverage providers in the county for public safety purposes, they were very reluctant to give us any information, and any mapping, we had to sign a waiver that we wouldn't distribute it. So the information that we are able to now publicly present comes from the private sector through the FCC where it's released. That gives us the ability to publicly present it now. So I think their mapping is based on model information, not actual field survey as much.
Okay.
All right. So I am open to suggesting that this moves forward with the website that Greg is working on. And I think the other thing you're asking for, Dan, is just support in advertising the site and putting it out there to the public so people know it's there.
That's right. One of the people in Greg's department, one of the GIS people said, this made the point really strongly. This is not going to work unless a lot of people participate.
Right.
And so I'm going to need everyone's help to spread the word about the existence of this site if we go ahead and do it.
And that could be included in something that Dominic sends out and, that sort of thing. How do the other Geo committee members feel about letting this move forward? Rich and Mike?
It sounds fine to me. I mean, you have to know what to fix. So.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I just don't want us to be assuming responsibility for solutions.
All right. Well, there's lots of good questions, but there's already been a little work done on this, and let's just see where it goes. So thank you, Dan, for bringing it up. Is there more to say or do right now?
No, I don't think so. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you hearing this out.
Greg?
Yeah, just to be clear, so we can modify the purpose and the language in the way that we present the information on the website and work with Dominic and Dan to include that in the press releases that go out, that it's just really focused on a survey of underserved areas in the town, in the county. I think that's the population or the areas, the geographic areas that you're trying to reach first and foremost. So you can pick out the pockets of Tompkins County that you know about or that I know about and focus just on the residents in those areas as well if you want to target people to improve the responses. So that's one point. And then the second question is, I just want to make sure that we have the permission based on this conversation, or if there's a vote to proceed with the project, and we would work with Dan to be the lead to represent the legislature in that project.
Yeah, I think we want you to move forward, and Dan would be sort of the person to connect with about this.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to add, I'm happy, anybody else wants to jump in and work with me, I'm happy to do it. This is a issue across many of our districts. I'm happy to be the lead person. I just want to invite, I'm not trying to make this my project. If anybody wants to join me, welcome aboard.
Yeah, and I think it will require all of us to spread the word about it and tell our constituents that it's happening. So that's definitely part of it. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Greg, for your work, and we'll see you soon. Happy New Year. Okay, moving on. This meeting is going much longer than I thought it would. I'm not usually super into the whole like recapping the goals and setting the goals, but I did take a minute and made a short list of some of the things that we worked on last year, because I feel like last year was a very busy year in Geo. We did do numerous policies, revised and voted on. We finished revising the rules of the legislature, and then we went back and revised the rules of the legislature again to include a sort of code of conduct in the rules. We had numerous updates from the county clerk, Board of Elections, several from assessment department, from the planning department, from the public library. Jonathan gave us a report on MEGA, Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance. We started work on re-envisioning our advisory boards and policies. That's something that will definitely need to continue into this year. We went through a very long process of setting up and appointing the Independent Redistricting Commission. We talked numerous times as the technology changed and COVID rules changed, and we had lots of questions and discussions about hybrid meetings and our technology and how we were going to work on things. And those were just a couple of the things that I pulled out. Of course, we had numerous resolutions and all the standard things that come before this committee. So just wanted to say one more time, thank you to everyone for your good work. It was a very full year, and I felt like things just kind of kept popping up on the radar for Geo to work on. So I look forward to seeing what this new year brings, and I already have a couple things on my list of things that we're going to work on this year, and hopefully we'll have another awesome group of legislators on this committee. So that's all I want to say. Lisa or Amy, do you have any other administration reports for us?
I think I covered everything. Thanks.
Okay. County Attorney Bill Troy is here. Do you have any reports for us?
Absolutely nothing has happened new since my last report a few days ago. You tuckered me out giving that report.
Well, thanks for being here. It's good to have you on the committee. Director of Finance, Rick Snyder, do you have anything for us?
Nope, I have nothing new to report today, but thank you for the opportunity anyway.
All right, thanks for being here.
Mm-hmm.
Communications Director, Dominic Recchio.
Hi, everyone. A few things that haven't been mentioned yet. I don't think several independent redistricting commission public input sessions will be held over the next few months. Those were announced recently, and some invites going out directly to officials who represent those areas, as well as the public in those areas. So looking forward to those conversations on the Tuesday nights, alternating against the legislature meetings. And the other update I have is just on the website. The health department, I received a report yesterday that the health department page is getting closer to being transitioned to the mobile friendly version. And I know that has taken a very long time, but it is a complex web page. And I think we're getting closer, ideally by the end of this month, that will be transitioned over. COVID updates are still happening daily. And there's an archive of previous pages there. So I'll let everyone know when that's complete. And the homepage will also be going through some renovations this year, as we have, better links to emergency notifications, legislator meetings. One of the portals is broken on that right now. So there's several website updates ongoing or planned as well. So those are the only things I had beyond the normal COVID and reimagining public safety work.
All right, great, thank you. Anybody have questions for Dominic? All right, thanks for everything you're doing. Any committee members have any reports or things that they wanted to bring up? All right, there are a couple of budget adjustments and transfers for information only. And is there anything else, any other business today for this committee? All right, thank you all for being here. Hope to see you next month. We are adjourned.
Bill, can you stay on the line for a minute?
Bill?
Bill, can you hear me?